For more on this, we can cross to Montreal and bring in John Gradek, faculty lecturer in aviation management and supply chain management at McGill University. John, thank you so much for joining us today on the program. So, as we've been discussing the plight of Spirit Airlines, it had brought the Ryanair low-cost model of flying to the U.S., and that was successful until it wasn't. But now it seems for them the straw that broke the camel's back is this rising price of oil. So can we expect to see other airlines succumb to the same fate?
We'll probably see a couple of more airlines go down the same path over the next 12 months if this fuel crisis continues. There's no end in sight as far as I can see in terms of political resolution to the issue of the Strait of Hormuz opening up. So the issue about pricing for aviation fuel and for just crude oil is going to continue. So there are a couple of other carriers in the U.S. who are on the edge, and they are, carriers like JetBlue is probably one of those carriers, and Frontier is the other carrier. But it's a phenomenon that we're going to see more and more of come out of this crisis in fuel. There are European carriers, there are Asian carriers that are all cash strapped. What the carriers are doing these days, they're flying airplanes with a cost of fuel that has practically tripled in some markets. And when you have that high of a cost element in your operation, which is fuel, and you have that much of an increase, you have to have some either other costs that you can control or fares that you have to go up significantly in order for you to come out ahead on the cost side. So it is going to be a phenomenon we'll see start to pick up speed as the weeks come along.
What other things can airlines do in this situation? You mentioned there that we can probably expect to see fares increase in light of this. But do they have other options?
Yeah, they do. I think the one thing that the carriers have is to reduce their flying and to look at unprofitable flights and cancel those unprofitable flights that are now unprofitable as a result of fuel increases. So, you're seeing rationalization of services already in Western Europe, short haul flights that are flying on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Saturdays are being canceled. There are routes that have either yet to start or have been operating for a short time where the profitability has not been demonstrated to the airline, and those routes are subject to cancellation. So there are things that the airlines are doing to kind of re-optimize their schedule and to make sure that whatever is being flown is able to make money, recover its cost at least of this increased level in fuel. So it is a major challenge for the airlines these days.
Now, John, recently we heard that the head of the International Energy Agency warned that here in Europe, they could run out of jet fuel this summer. Is the situation really that dire?
Yeah, I think it is. It's a situation where most of Western Europe does import its aviation fuel from the Middle East. Up to 50% in some countries of that aviation fuel is refined and imported from the Middle East. So that supply has now stopped since the end of February. So we're now into month number 3 of no aviation fuel coming out of the Middle East. There are reserves, of course. There's stuff sitting in tanks across Western Europe airports, but those reserves are drying up very, very quickly. There is rationing is starting to take place. I see, Italy and Germany are starting to make some noise about rationing fuel to short haul flights within Europe, reducing the amount of fuel or not fueling aircraft that are flying for less than 3 hours. So far, the international flights, the long haul flights, have not been affected. But as we get closer and closer to a drawdown of the aviation fuel reserves across Western Europe, we might see some of those international flights get canceled on occasional days when there's not enough load. So the crisis is yet to start in terms of in earnest. in terms of of cancellations and in terms of routes being suspended, and potentially in Europe, carriers starting to consider shutting down operations. We saw Lufthansa CityLine shut down its fleet of 27 aircraft a couple of weeks ago, and they were sort of blaming fuel. We're not really sure. Maybe a labor shortage, maybe a labor dispute. But there are initiatives. There are carriers in Europe that are maybe not as in bad shape as Spirit was, but pretty close. So we have to keep an eye out on their financials and to see how they react to this continuing fuel crisis.
John, thank you so much for being on the program, sharing your expertise with us. That's John Gradek, faculty lecturer in aviation management and supply chain management at McGill University.